Hello and welcome to the final webcast for Growing Old Around the Globe on Coursera. Anne and I are thrilled to welcome you back, we hope, or perhaps this is your first time, because we have still had people enrolling as late as this past week, and we're thrilled that you've joined us. We are really wrapping up the course today. We can't believe that it's over, and yet we have so much to do. So the first thing that we'd like to do is before we introduce our special guests, because we have a whole group joining us from different points around the globe, what we'd like to do is just cover some logistics. Anne and I noticed, along with Aram and Brian, that there were some challenges. It was a system error with submission of the portfolio assignment. So
the
Anne,
peer evaluations for week
that was
4.
it.
It closed about 6 hours early. We're not sure why it happened. But as soon as we noticed that it happened, we did open up peer evaluation availability for the following week. So there shouldn't be any penalties if you didn't get all 5 peer evaluations in. If you do have some issues, we'll be addressing them, because we want everyone who earned a statement of accomplishment or a statement of achievement to obtain that.
Right.
So let us know if you're having any problems under the Help Center thread in the discussion forum, and we'll triage those as we get them in.
Yes, so please do post if you have questions, but recognize that the peer evaluation component for week 5 is still open. So you still have a chance to complete that portion of the assignment. And then remember that there is the portfolio assignment for week 6, and we close the course on August 3rd. So the course page will become dormant as of August 3rd. But as we go on in the webcast, we'll talk about keeping our community and our dialogue alive while we are no longer live on Coursera. We'll talk about that as we go forward, because we know a number of you have tweeted and posted on Facebook asking about that, as well as noting it on the discussion forum. So without further ado, 3 of our special guests, we're expecting 2 more people to join us. 3 of our special guests are here with us now. So you'll remember, I'm sitting right next to me, Chala Akai. Chala is from the School of Dental Medicine here at the University of Pennsylvania, and Chala is a physician who works with Kelly Jordan Shudo. Dr. Kelly Jordan Shudo was one of our early expert interviews for Growing Old Around the Globe. And then sitting next to Chala is Max Topaz. You haven't met Max before, but he is one of the teaching assistants, and you probably heard from him on the discussion forum. Max is a PhD student here in the School of Nursing. His specialty is informatics, so electronic health records and communication. And Max is making great progress on his research. Of course, he's dedicated to care of older adults, so all of his informatics research is actually about older adults.
Right. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Yeah. Great to have you here. And joining us remotely is Sonny Magalung. Hi, Sonny.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Great to have you here. And Sonny has been a very active teaching assistant as well on our discussion forums. Sonny's the one who, for example, jumped right in and posted Oliver Sacks's 80th birthday essay for us on the discussion forum so that it was broadly accessible to everyone. And Sonny is working on his bachelor's degree in nursing here at the University of Pennsylvania. And Sonny's also, I should note that he's been really fabulous about getting film for our video perspectives. So thanks, Sonny, and it's really a pleasure to have you here for the last webcast.
Thank you for having me.
And we're waiting for GJ Melendez-Torres to join us from England, and we're waiting for Sarah Strauss to join us from San Francisco. 2 wonderful places, Oxford, England, and San Francisco, California. You'll remember that GJ, in addition to being one of our guests for last week's webcast, was also the curator of our Twitter feed at Old Globe MOOC. And Sarah Strauss-Berger is the person who managed our beautiful Facebook page. And both GJ and Sarah are people who have longstanding commitment to work in aging and work with older people, and they've been the ones who've said, hey, are we running this course again? Are we going to run Old Globe MOOC again? And if so, when will that happen? Because we've noted that a number of you have asked, will it happen again? Will it change? We don't know that yet. Of course, we have to go through official channels, both here at Penn and at Coursera, in order to rerun a course. But one of the things that Ann and I would like to talk with everyone about today, and particularly GJ and Sarah, is keeping our Twitter feed and our Facebook page active and alive so that we all have a place to contribute our thoughts, our observations, and our references and resources as we are able to continue our conversation about what it is to age in a way that we find both valuable and helpful in families, communities, and societies. So we're eager to hear your thoughts on that as well, as usual. And we'll be looking at our Twitter feed and at this discussion forum for your questions. But what we thought we'd start to do is in this webcast, we really want to address two questions. The first question is, for all of us here, what is most important as we think about it from our perspectives? What do we think is most important going forward to change, produce, or develop to improve the future of our old globe? And then the second question we'll all answer is, given our experience as part of this MOOC, being part of Growing Old Around the Globe, what was most valuable to us? What did we take away? And we'd like you to answer those questions as well, or to respond to our answers as we go through the webcast. And I believe that Roseanne, one of our most active participants, has also posed, perhaps without even knowing that we were planning these very same questions. I think Roseanne has asked a very similar question.
Yep, Roseanne poses a three-part question on the webcast discussion forum. How would we address, as teaching staff, the opportunities and challenges of global aging? What aspects do we see as most important? And how would we address issues at personal, local, national, and global levels? So I think with the mix of TAs we have, I see Sarah just joined us. Hi, Sarah. We'll all have different opinions about these, what is most important, because there is not one answer to this. This is about taking these aspects of aging on different levels and coming up with solutions for the, it's not even the problem of aging, but the challenge of aging.
Challenge. Because if we see it as a problem, what we might think about is that some of the issues we've discussed, say demographics, as one of the hot threads throughout Growing Old around the globe, are insurmountable, that there isn't a great deal we can do to change them. But as Eric Streisnig pointed out in last week's webcast, that's likely not the case, and that demographics, for example, are not nearly what they are forecast to be, either in positive terms or in negative terms. So I think that that is a great sort of connection, Roseanne, with what we wanted to talk about, and we're sure that others of you have similar refinements and responses. So perhaps what we'll do is just start with, how about Max, if I ask you to go first? Based on your background as a geriatric nurse, and as someone who's very interested in informatics and electronic information, what do you think priorities for improving the future of our aging world?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Isn't it nothing small about our questions
That's a very small but a very tough question. So personally, for me, I'm working in informatics, as Dr. Kagan has mentioned. And in informatics, we're kind of trying to tease out those important technologies, important approaches, technological approaches that will enable us all and all people that are out there now to kind of to make aging to a successful journey, to make aging to a more fruitful and happy journey. That's the main goal of using technologies and informatics for me in order to kind of facilitate aging and help older adults and younger adults to better understand each other. So this is the global picture.
Yeah, you know, that's something that I think is very critical for us to understand, is that technology is a tool. And I think that if you're like me, many of us are overwhelmed by the technological platforms, the tools that are available just for simple communication, whether it's Skype or Gmail or Twitter. Those tools can feel overwhelming because they feel both novel as well as being somewhat forbidding. How do I understand them? Where are the familiar elements that I can turn to so that I understand how to communicate as I would person to person or in writing? And your idea of using technological tools to make the life course more fruitful and to promote communication within and between generations is something that allows us to think about local solutions. What would using technological tools to enhance communication look like in your community or your family or your society? I think that's a great place to start. Why don't we go around and then we'll come back to some of the themes that we're seeing. So why don't we go to one of our remote participants. Sonny, you're quite young in both your life course and your career, and yet your passion for understanding issues of aging at individual, family, community, and society levels has been so clear in your participation on Old Globe. What are you thinking about as a priority to improve the future of our aging world?
Well, I can speak to a lot of what I've seen in the discussion forums, and I noticed that some people are still yearning and looking for that one specific or one definitive answer that's going to help us with aging. And the more that I think about it, the more that I realize that what might work for one individual and one society might not actually work for another individual or society across the world. So what I think we really need to focus on is individual education. And we've been really fortunate to have that here at Old Globe. And a lot of our experts have said that education is key for empowerment as well as longevity of older adults. So I think if we can educate individuals, they can go ahead and take this knowledge, combine it with their own personal experiences, and really craft solutions that I think will help them with the aging process. And then from individuals, we can go to families, communities, and societies. So I think if we can replicate that dialogue, that would be a good start for the future of aging societies.
That's a marvelous connection to Max's comment, Sonny, and so important in terms of both what we've done in Old Globe and what we've learned from our experts, as well as understanding the platform. Just a few years ago, remember that the first MOOC really didn't appear until 2008. And here we are just 5 years later having a global conversation with, as Ann and I noted in last week's webcast, very high rates of participation. Whether you're active on the discussion forum or whether you're active on in the portfolio assignments on Facebook or Twitter, what we've seen is that many, many people are using the resources of Old Globe, and that speaks both to education and to the use of technologic tools, to the use of electronic technologies to promote and enhance education. And your focus on the individual and what works for one individual may not work for the other, I think is important too. Don't you, Ann?
Yeah, Because it's all about what we're comfortable with. If we're forcing ourselves into these technologies that we don't feel comfortable with, then there's not open dialogue. So when we talk about education, when we talk about intergenerational discourse, we want to create the environment, the community environment, the family environment that we feel comfortable in order to openly discuss these issues. Again, they're not always comfortable issues to think or talk about. Many times I think the problem we have with discussion about aging is as younger people, we don't want to think of ourselves aging. We don't maybe want to think about our parents aging, and therefore we stop the discussion because it's uncomfortable. But to Sonny's point, if we continue to educate ourselves, I think that opens up the door. And if we this generation that's coming up right now is so much more comfortable with these technologies.
So Sonny's
as well.
generation.
Yes. the millennials, right?
Yes,
if you will.
If you're in North America, the generation of late teens and early 20s is generally referred to as the millennial generation. And many people have noted that the millennial generation has many different characteristics as a generation than, for example, the baby boom that we see in North America and in the UK, Europe, and Australia. And one of the things to sort of consider is, what are the generational characteristics? What are sort of the signature style, communication, and historical experiences of a particular generation in your society that would allow you to understand what's important to that generation? How can intergenerational dialogue or dialogue within a generation actually be promoted? Because as Anne pointed out, we're often talking about discomfort, and some of that discomfort may actually arise from lack of knowledge. And we've certainly seen that, haven't we, here on Old Globe, where people have had questions and concerns, particularly about individual aging, but I think we also see some of those concerns played out in larger groups, in populations, for example, where we're concerned about elder dependency. And one of the things that I hope we've done is to dispute the idea that elder dependency and a lack of contribution to the economic base of a society through the workforce is probably a really outmoded concern for most societies, where we see people actively working as well as working in uncompensated positions, childcare within families, for example, in much greater numbers than we ever have before.
So no, I was going to say, I was wondering, as somebody in the healthcare workforce, if Sarah had some opinions she wanted to chime in, her perspective on caregivers, paid and unpaid, and what you think is important to support our aging societies around the world.
Sure, absolutely. You know, as I was preparing for this webcast, I asked a lot of my nursing colleagues here in San Francisco, what do you think about our aging world? What do you think is the most important thing we can do? And nearly unanimously, everyone said education, that people are not prepared for aging themselves, for their relatives aging. You know, and working in an ICU, we care for a lot of older adults who find themselves in situations I'm sure they never had imagined, and their families had never imagined, and they have no idea what to do. So I think we can definitely say education is needed as everyone is moving in this aging world. And I think that especially ties in with caregivers. You know, people find themselves in these situations unexpectedly and hadn't prepared for it as you would prepare for a job or maybe a child. It kind of just happens to you. So I think we absolutely need more support and more education for these caregivers, formal and informal.
And that then speaks to, Sarah, to this idea that when we're talking about education, we're talking about a massive amount of information, both scientific evidence as well as thought, expert thought, consensus, and the arts and humanities. I think many people who participated in Old Globe, both our experts as well as our teaching staff, because we have such a large teaching staff. There are 13 of us, plus Aram and Brian, who are our technological support. And one of the things that I think we've all been impressed by is how vast the body of information related to the large topic of aging is. And that means that we need to get discrete and focused about what we're talking about, which topics are relevant to a particular question, and how we need to appraise the evidence and understand what's relevant to answering a particular question. And this perhaps most profoundly came up when Dr. Kelly Jordan Shudo talked about the chronological age of 50 being a biologically important marker. And we got such incredible and wonderful discussion on that point. So that's perhaps a time when we can turn to Chala and say, as a physician, and as someone who studies aging at a biological level, at a cellular and subcellular level, when you think about the future of our aging world, what are some priorities that you see?
Thank you very much for just thinking about aging, biological aging as 50 once again, because I think it's really important, because aging of an organism, of a cell and a human starts from the age of birth, unfortunately.
Very important to remember.
And things become evident at the cellular level around the age of 30, 40, depending on the organism or the organ. But in the past generations, early 1900s, 50, because of the signs you would see associated with aging, 50 was the time when you started aging. You know, you're over the hill now. Now you would be, you would insult a person if you said that right now.
Right.
So this drives the point that we need to start thinking about aging from birth. Incorporate the idea of aging as part of life and not an end point necessarily. Starting from elementary school, perhaps, not consider that older, advancing age populations as people retired, away from, you know, active life, and not to be considered in, you know, important aspects of economy or social life or politics. So I think not at an subcellular or cellular level, but as an individual level, we need to start also plan for our aging from early age, not with the concept of aging with regard to social life, but as an individual, with regard to our bodies, we need to start eating right. I mean, this is very lame, but everybody has heard of it, but it is very important.
Eating right, there is no magic answer in diet, right?
No,
eating well.
Eating well, not too much, not too little, and consider that we are going to be part of that population eventually, and take care of ourselves and our people around us, and start incorporating the aspects of aging into our lives, individual lives and work life, and go from there.
So I just want to sort of emphasize some things that I'm hearing, because Chala is summarizing a major component of the course for us. The first is that there is no single answer. Remember, Sonny reflected that many people on the discussion forums, and there are about 700 or 800 people who've been active on the discussion forums, but remember, we are a course of 6,000 active learners and 9,000 at our high point, 9,000 enrolled learners. So Chala is pointing out what Sonny reflected from the discussion forum, that there is no single answer to aging well and to, if you want to use the term, healthy aging, but a balanced diet that's not too little and not too much, along with exercise, is almost certainly worth the investment, in part because while it's good for you biologically, a nourishing, enjoyable diet and exercise are almost certain to be valuable psychologically and socially to you as well, because meals are social events, and for most of us, exercise and moving our bodies, using our minds, because exercise applies to both to the mind and to the body, are both psychological and social events, as well as being biologically valuable.
Yes, and I want to make an interesting point to what Max said about informatics.
Yes.
It's not only important, I think, for connecting with the rest of the society, but it's also going to be important in neuroplasticity. I know there are some very live conversations appearing at the forums. It's not only you're just enriching your lives, but you're also enriching the connections the neurons make between themselves in the brain. Mm-hmm. Yes. So you will have multiple returns from that kind of investment as well.
And remember, neuroplasticity, that ability of our nerve cells called neurons to respond in our brain to the stimulation of using different tools and technologies of communicating and forming new relationships, have biological effects as well as having important effects for our psyches and our social lives. And I think GJ Melendez-Torres, whom those of you will remember if you were with us for the Week 5 webcast. GJ, how's Oxford today?
Oxford is beautiful. I'm glad to finally be with all of you after 30 minutes of technological wrangling, but it's lovely to be with all of you.
You know, that's exactly what we were talking about. Those technologies are sometimes off-putting, but we made them, and we're now into the last 30 minutes of our webcast. And GJ, as you know, we've been going around talking, going around our table, our virtual table here, talking about what would you prioritize to improve the future of our aging world. So you talked about transportation as something that's really important in last week's webcast. What would you add to that as a priority?
I think I'd emphasize the importance of really coherent social planning. Not only planning individually, as you've been talking about, planning in advance for your old age, but also social planning for old age, right? Are we making sure that we're developing the knowledge that we need in the future to help plan for the phenomenon of aging that's coming down the turnpike, right? This phenomenon that's upon us now. Are we making sure that we know what it is that's coming down the line, planning demographically, planning socially, planning in terms of how we build our cities and our communities, planning in terms of how we structure our welfare schemes and our welfare benefits, thinking about how we structure our social services and our healthcare services, especially for those of us who are Americans, now that it looks like affordable care is upon us now. How do we plan socially, and how do we make sure we have the knowledge coming into the next 20, 30 years that will help us provide a society that is friendly to aging?
GJ, you know, that's something that echoes two themes that I know you're really passionate about. One is social policy planning and thinking about local social solutions that are about building livable societies. And the other, of course, embedded in what you're saying, I hear, is the idea of being critical in both appraisal and analysis of what we know, what we don't know, what we need to know, and how we know those things, and the relative value of those sources of information, which of course links back to what we've been talking about in terms of education and in terms of technology. So I think you're emphasizing for us two very essential attributes of what will create a better future. One is practical formulation. What is a social policy? But the other is how do we manage the knowledge and the information that we need to get there?
I think to echo something that came up in the webcast last week with our friend Eric is that when we think about the knowledge that we need, and when we also think about what works, we need to take into account the full spectrum of things that are impacting our population, right? Not just demographically, but also socially. And also, you know, fertility, right? That's very important as well, especially as fertility regimes, right? The way in which societies have children, the way, you know, the number of children societies have per childbearing woman, how that is impacted and how that will impact aging, both because of the possibility of a low fertility track, right? But also in terms of thinking about how we need to build up what that human capital is and make sure that we can sustain the support ratio towards our older adults going into the future.
I think talking about this also brings up the point that Eric was also talking about looking at research and not taking on that catastrophic futility of individual pieces of research. We need to look at it, kind of analyze it in our own, look at contradictory evidence, and then go forward with being hopeful, being anticipatory, but also being flexible.
Right. I think that my favorite quote from the webcast last week was, the reason projections exist is so that you can show that they're not true going into the future, right?
That was a great quote.
Falsifiable. And so the idea is, if we know that this is a cliff that we're going to jump off in the future, how do we make a U-turn before we get there? And I think that really good anticipatory, critically engaged, sensitive social planning that takes into account what we know, what we need to know, and that we might know going forward is, again, the key. And, of course, transportation, because transportation is very important.
Absolutely. Transportation, well heard. And I like what you're saying in terms of planning and thinking about issues like fertility, which most people commonly, just in popular discourse, wouldn't actually associate with aging. That's a reflection of what Chala was saying in terms of understanding that both biologically as well as in demographic and economic terms, as you're saying, we can't understand aging as a time point somewhere along the later portion of the life course, but rather aging biologically begins with birth, and aging at family and population levels clearly begins with fertility and birth experiences. And I think that there are innumerable ways in Old Globe that we've been reminded of the importance of really deconstructing that myth that aging is just something that happens when you're 65 or 75, or you begin to see the effects when you're 40 or 50. That's clearly not the case. And as a result, aging really is a life course experience that needs to be recast, both culturally in terms of how we perceive and value things, but also in terms of evidence and information. And that's perhaps one of the most important things that we all can take away from our experience of Old Globe.
This would be a really good time to cue that song from The Lion King about the circle of life, but we're not going to do that. Anyway.
Yes, for those of you who are not familiar with the Broadway musical and the Disney film, The Lion King, there is a very famous song called The Circle of Life, and that would be a great background piece to play. But unfortunately, we don't have the music capacity. Aram and Brian didn't prepare for that.
For next time.
Yeah. So what we're talking about, yes, we're going to, so this was kind of a lead into that. We talk about what's important and what what we see on the discussion forums, things people learn about, how we prioritize aging. And the question that Roseanne posed about what we think, where the opportunities are and where the importance lies, I think that while teaching this course and organizing this course, I've really started to think more about aging myself on an individual level, and I think we all gleaned new information from this course, from having these wonderful experts come. So I just wanted to see what our teaching assistants thought about something new they learned or a new perspective they have now from the course about the importance of the challenges of the aging community, and maybe something new or something interesting that they're now incorporating into their own life about how they approach aging.
Well, maybe what I could do, because Jenny Mackness, who was also one of our teaching assistants, and her husband John are actually on holiday and were unable to join us for the webcast. And you'll remember that John has been an active learner on Old Globe. But they did send us a message that is probably a really great segue into your question. And John and Jenny were thinking about the idea that in terms of considering the future and learning about this, they think that sharing knowledge about what it takes to be healthy enough to enable older people to make social and economic contributions is really important. And we've obviously seen many different examples of that. Some of you may have seen my tweet about the gentleman who's not a barber by trade, but does barbering in City Park in Hartford, Connecticut, that was featured on a news program here in America called CBS Sunday Morning. There are all sorts of examples that have popped up in our portfolios as well as in our discussion forums. And Jenny goes on to say, we feel it's important that aging societies accept the challenge of being healthy and productive as they can at a time when in some countries when birth rates fall and financial resources to care for older people are coming under pressure. In a sense, old age needs rebranding from a need to care for to an image of caring and contributing. Perhaps in 10 years, they go on, obesity, for example, will be socially unacceptable as the need for good health in old age becomes more of a requirement rather than something which is nice to have. In a similar way, they draw a parallel in a similar way to in which smoking is no longer as socially acceptable as it used to be. So with that, let's just go around the table and share with the Old Globers who are watching either live or in the archived version, what's the most important thing we've learned as being part of Old Globe? Because while we've organized this course and are ourselves often very invested in aging science and aging practice, we've also been learners because there's no way that you cannot learn from a community of 9,000 people. So GJ, Sonny, and Sarah, can we ask you, as we're going into our last 10 minutes of the webcast, what did you learn from being part of the Old Globe experience, and what do you think is important to share with all of the Old Globe community? GJ?
I think Sonny should go first.
Okay, so we're going to revert to age. So the youngest age, the youngest person gets to go first. So we'll work backward. Sonny, GJ, and Sarah, that's the order of their ages going up. So Sonny, can you share with us something about that?
Sarah's age.
Oh, so I didn't give away her age. It was only a relative comment. How's that?
Well, relatively, I probably am the youngest here, so I do have to say that I have a lot more to learn about aging. And what I've really enjoyed about this course is that we've been able to bring in a global population, and that's really just opened my eyes to how diverse and how many aspects there are to consider when it comes to the aging process. So I really enjoyed the dialogue we have here, and I think there's a lot to learn from what other people say around the globe and how we can look at the aging process.
Sonny, I think that's a compelling point. I know that Anne and I have been just blown away. That is the American vernacular expression for amazed and awestruck by how many people from so many different societies have offered their perspectives, have participated actively, and have taught one another. The value of the peer-to-peer, learner-to-learner communication in this course is unparalleled. GJ. Yeah.
Okay. I think what's been most interesting for me is to hear about aging and to talk about aging with people who are embodying that process and who are open to sharing how they've embodied the process of aging and what that means for their life meanings and how they look out into the world, in some cases in a negative way, but in many cases in terms of the changing meanings, the reshaping meanings, the evolving and contextual meanings of what aging is to them as they grow old. The joys of aging, the excitement of aging, the new challenges of aging and how they're confronting those, both in a very concrete way, but also, as I said, in how they embody the process of aging. And so I think for me that's been very valuable, and I think I thoroughly enjoyed learning and hearing about that from the old leaders all around the world who have been with us on these 6-week journey.
Great. Thank you, GJ.
Okay, I guess that's me. I think I'm just more psychologically older, right? It's not, we're not going by a physical age, right? No, I think I've enjoyed this course tremendously, and I think what maybe would kind of sum up my reflections would be, I kind of came back to one of my favorite phrases, which is think globally, act locally. And I've so much enjoyed our global discussions, and it's been really energizing to hear from people from all over the world who have the same problems or different perspectives. And I hope that everyone in this course feels the same way and will continue these discussions and dialogues both globally with us on Twitter and Facebook, but also bring it back locally to their own communities and societies, and that we start to really be a force of change here.
And the idea of being a force for change and a force for good is, I think, an idea on which we can all agree. So toward that point, and this is now returning more to logistics, a number of you have asked and commented on enjoying the course and how we can continue the dialogue. So here's our current plan. Our current plan is, and I'm hoping that Sarah and GJ will agree to this, and obviously Ann and I will help both of them, and we're going to ask all of the people who participated in running the course to contribute as well. But what we plan to do is to keep the Facebook page open and active. Right, Sarah?
Yes.
There we go. Sarah was the first person to bring this up. And that we will keep the Twitter feed at Old Globe MOOC live and active, particularly with Follow Fridays, Sound Off, and Friday Reads. We've done a lot of weekend activity. I think that's because it's easy for those of us who work in societies where there's a Monday to Friday work week. We're getting ready and thinking about coming into the next week as we close the current week. So our plan is that we'll keep those live, and we invite you to participate. I will say, in part because I have had this conversation with a number of people in my own life about this, do not be afraid of Facebook and Twitter. I say this, oops, sorry, didn't mean to touch my microphone there, but I want to really put this out there for everybody. Do not be afraid of social media. I think a lot of people perceive social media like Facebook and Twitter as something to which I need to contribute in order to get whatever is being put there by other people. That is not the case, and I have learned through my own experience. You can have a Facebook account with no information about yourself other than your name. You can have a Twitter account on which you never tweet a thing, but that will allow you to access the Facebook page. And GJ has said this several times in our discussion forum. We do want to emphasize it for everyone. You can just use the link for the Twitter feed to access the Twitter feed itself and to look at what resources, ideas, and information are placed there, but you do not need to tweet a thing. So we invite you to use these social media, not really as social media if you don't want to use them, but really as learning tools to go back to what all of us have been talking about in terms of learning and education. Anne, what have I missed?
No, I think that's it. I just wanted to leave everyone with something that came to me early on in the course was this is about growing old. So our globe is growing old, we are all growing old, but remember it's about growing. That's what this course is about. It's about growing the conversation. It's about learning how to grow as we age and learning how to grow our communities and societies around our aging population. So these are the things that we want to continue on Facebook and Twitter. And again, let's continue these conversations about critically analyzing the literature. I think critical appraisal. We've had a lot of research articles posted on our Twitter feed, and let's continue to do that and have the discussions and really dissect what the results are and post contradictory evidence and continue those discussions, and Facebook to really keep that global social connection going. I think it was a beautiful community that we created over the last 6 weeks, and I would love to see it continue.
Absolutely. And toward that end, some people have asked, particularly on Facebook, but also on Twitter and the discussion forums, will we be running Old Globe? Will it look the same? And when will we be doing that? As I mentioned at the top of the webcast, we don't know that right now because, of course, we have to go through official channels here at the School of Nursing at the University of Pennsylvania and with Coursera to know whether this course should happen again and how it should happen. We do have ideas for how we'd like to reshape it if we were to run Growing Old Around the Globe again, and we're looking for your ideas as well. So in addition to giving us a sense of what worked and what didn't work and what you'd like included if we were to do this again on the discussion forum up until August 3rd, which is when the page, the Coursera page for Growing Old Around the Globe will go dormant. We'd really like you to take just a few minutes and complete our end of course survey, which will be coming to you as an email. We'd love it if you would just take a few moments of your time, answer the questions on the survey so that we have a sense of all 6,000 active participants and perhaps even more. And we'd like you to give us ideas for what you'd like to see in the future. With that, we're just past 11 here on the East Coast of the United States. So with thanks to GJ, Sarah, Sonny, Max, Chala, and particularly Anne, who's been a fabulous partner in this, and with thanks to Aram and Brian, and to all of the other members of our Old Globe team, and most of all you, thank you for a great experience, and we look forward to continued dialogue. Bye-bye.